Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your Consciousness Transformation Ascension Guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, co-host of the Ascended World podcast, and bringing you today's Living the Shift. This is an interesting topic that comes in all the time, and it's something that's sort of hidden, but since we're sort of looking in all the cracks and crevices right now, it's really important for us to sort of hone in and see where there is space for us to shift beyond in habits and stuff that we've not been looking at. So one of the biggest things, and this is really interesting because everybody will say that they are not privy to this, but we all are in some degree, right? So the thing is that there is this huge addiction to drama in our embodiments in the 3D. And so, like I said, everybody will say, and I didn't even want to lead by talking about the word drama, because as soon as somebody says, oh, I'm a no drama llama, or no drama mama, whatever you want to call it, right? And so then they just sort of shut it off, and they're like, yeah, I'm not a part of that. I don't need that. I'm totally not a drama person. I get all this stuff. However, it's very, very embedded, and it's so embedded that there are so many different layers of what we call drama. I have to put this up so that I don't see the, let me turn this. So it's that many people don't even see it within themselves. And we're not even used to how that, because you think drama and you think, oh, somebody's dramatic and there's like a big thing. So that's one level, right, of many. There's this, the obvious levels of drama of, so dramatic and everybody look at me and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So I hear this a lot in spiritual discussions. I hear this a lot when people are talking about, living in a conscious state, being spiritually aware, and going through this whole thing of, I choose no drama and all this kind of stuff. However, there's all different kinds of drama. And I think part of it has to do with this living in a space of lack when we're embodied here. Because that's really what the basis of our existence is embodied, has been this experience of lack. So we want something. That means I feel like I'm in lack of it, right? I want attention. I need attention to be shown that I am loved. That shows something that shows a feeling of lack, meaning that I don't feel love for myself and I need to have it from someplace else. I have to make this kind of a presentation. I have to do this kind of dog and pony show for people to believe me in something. That's a big one in the spiritual world. That's creation of drama. And that comes from lack too. This belief, number one, that I have to prove myself, right? Morning, Anne. B, that, so A, I have to prove myself. B, that I have to be approved of by others, right? And C, that something that I do isn't valid unless it is validated by somebody else, right? These are all these beliefs. So the thing that's really interesting is when we look at drama that we make, it's a big thing for us to step back and be able to see that within ourselves. Because often we talk about, what's going to get our attention, right? Look at the news, look at the media, look at how everybody is so addicted to, every moment's update of this COVID virus thing, right? I don't watch the news. I barely know what's going on. I pretty much live as I'm guided to and called to do. So, but the thing is, what happens is when we get into a drama belief, we get to a place of, I'm sorry, I just got distracted for a moment. We get to this belief of certain kinds of drama. It's like this, like, I have to put all my attention to it. And like, look, it's worthwhile. Like we talk about like the epic journeys, right? Epic journeys. What does that imply? It implies that somebody has to have this massively suffering base, the huge things for them to overcome, because they start from a place of lack and they end from a place of non-lack, right? And we believe that that's the better story. The ego has grown to believe that the better story is, oh, you've got to overcome some massive things. People until recently, right? Until very recently, many wouldn't even talk like many wouldn't acknowledge like somebody coming into their divine gifts unless they had something like a near death experience, or they were born special and all that kind of stuff. And so what's interesting because, and like, look, at for a long time it was like, oh, I've had a near death experience. Oh, what? Good morning, Gloria. Oh, what kind of near death experience did you have? And whatever. Here's another kind of drama. What kind of sickness do you have? Or how badly have you had the sickness? I've talked about this before. I can't even remember what context, but I remember, my husband used to come home from the office, and this is years ago, and he'd talk about, how he would just be like, oh, you get sucked into these conversations about all kinds of things, and I'm like, yeah, Sarah says the healer's journey. Right. Right. We have so many stories, and we think that is like the exalted journey to take, right? Is to overcome something huge, right? Some big lack or something. Anyway, so my husband had come home a long time ago. We were talking about things that people talked about, and he goes, yeah, it sort of brings me down. I'm like, well, you don't have to be a part of those conversations. And he just didn't even know what I was talking about. I'm like, you don't have to take part in the conversations of, oh, how terrible this is, or how terrible that is, or like, look at how terrible mine is compared to yours. Now that's drama. That's totally addiction to drama, right? And I said, you can just change it to like what's positive, what's good in your life, what you find enjoyable or something good about the situation. I said, but you sit in a room of people, right? Or you're in a group of people. Oh, this happened. And then all of a sudden what happens? Everybody there starts to tell stories about when they got flat tires, and it's almost becomes this comparative competition, right? Of oh, who had the worst situation, what was harder, and who had to overcome this, or oh no, I was stuck in the middle of nowhere and I had to do this, and I had to lift the car by myself because I didn't have Jack, and it escalates, right? It's the whole fish story, like how big was the fish? And so, that's a really common thing in our society. So we get stuck in this drama, which is all ego based, because there is no drama in higher consciousness, because everything's perfect. And the ego believes, oh, there's some story, some lack based thing, some fear, some anxiety to be important, to be important here. There's something, some lesson, big lesson through an experience of lack and suffering and overcoming. That's so important that we don't realize how embedded it is in everything we do. So even as we become more conscious, right, in the bigger picture and our spirituality and stuff, it's funny because so when I first started in this, so like, okay, let's just give you a little background. I've done it before, but this is a different context, right? So when I was all through my life, I've always had these abilities have always been prevalent, but I always ignored them. Okay, I didn't know what to do with them because my generation in general, it was still sort of a hidden thing. It was something you don't talk about in public. If something was known in the family, it wasn't really talked about. That kind of stuff. I was very open as a child, and I had as I tried to shut it down, as many have, right? So as I grew up, I found ways to work around it. I found ways to work with it, and actually really let it be embedded as part of my personality, and utilize it for bigger purposes, for good expansive things, right? Which is why I was really good at management and corporate and all that kind of stuff, because I could actually read people really well and help them, come to a place of coordination and things like that. Anyway, so I had all these other things, premonitory dreams, dead people visiting me, like all through the years, like more and more things happen, but I ignored them. And then one day I literally just woke up, and it was like my higher self said, enough screwing around, because you came here to do something else. You came here to do this and help people come into this themselves. So I'm going to just pull all the veils away, and that's going to be that. And then then we're just going to move forward from there. It was it was quite disturbing and terrifying to me at the time, because at that point there wasn't all of this information out in the public as there is today. And that was only, a little more than a decade ago, 11 years ago. And so, but here's the thing. Did I have a near-death experience? I did not. I literally woke up one morning and I could hear the universe and I understood it in some ways that I could not even tell you how I hadn't been consciously understanding of it before. And yet what's interesting is it was so undermined for so long because I didn't have a near-death experience. I didn't have some big traumatic thing in my life that caused me to push myself there. I actually was in a good place in my life at the time. And then I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me, because it was like waking up one morning and my entire world was different, right? So the biggest trauma or drama there was that I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what it was. And I was sort of pushed from the beginning to listen to my guidance, right? So I did. I went into this voracious period. I learned and relearned. I realized that I knew how to do all of this stuff and just had forgotten. And it was so easy. And then, I started doing this full time. And then not even a year into doing this kind of work, spiritual work and everything full time, was when the whole practice of Trinity energy progression came into me. And part of it is that we are simply the divine. Part of it is pulling out all those partitions like that, purposely, intentionally, to a place of remembrance, right? That we don't learn anything, that we already have it all within us. And so there doesn't need to be any drama with that. It's actually quite a beautiful thing. It's quite love-filled and expansive and extremely powerful, because there aren't any dog and pony shows, right? And I don't say that with any judgment, but this is what we're so used to. We're used to saying, oh, to bring in this kind of energy, we have to do this. And this is where I'm going into drama. This is just an example. I'm not doing this to plug Trinity, although I always do, but this is just an example, right? So we have so many practices out there, and I'm certified in so many of them, or I was certified in so many of them before I started doing it's like, oh, well, you've got to do this in these positions or this way. You have to walk around, in a circle clockwise. You have to do this only on the full moon. You have to only do this. And so, these are all dramatic insertions to help us. And okay, so I will say it's to help us anchor in energies we've forgotten to use, right? The challenge that we have with that is we have gotten so adapted to and addicted to the drama that goes along with those things. And I'm not saying it with judgment. This is just an observation. We're so addicted to the drama of the stuff for us that we believe we have to do to access divine energy. And that comes from, by the way, the belief that we're not innately worthy and not innately powerful. Because it's when we start to, good morning, Nikki. It's when we start to embrace the fact that we are all that powerful, that we are all that we don't have to doubt or believe we have to pull things in from the outside, or we don't have to, use this tool, whatever it is, this chanting, these frequencies, this drug, right? People use consciousness heightening drugs and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to use these words. We don't have to use these actions. I don't have to use these positions. Actually, put my hands here to access this kind of energy in this way. So it's great so here's the thing. It's great for us to create those. It's beautiful for us to create those, because that's all the different flavors of ice cream of us remembering, right? But then we get into that place where we're addicted to, it can't be simple. It can't be simple, because if it was simple, then it wouldn't be any effort to access that. But here's the joke. The joke is we're already that powerful. We're already that infinitely powerful. And we've just forgotten, and that's part of the game that we've incited as we embody here, this part of our consciousness. So what happens is we are always looking for this next best thing out of us, right? Oh, okay, well, that was great and that was powerful. So this is what would happen, and especially in the beginning of when I was sharing Trinity, is, oh, well, that was really powerful. Oh, but I need this. I need to do this because this has hand positions and this has symbols and everything else. And it's like, well, yeah, but then you miss the meaning that this is beyond all the symbols and the hand positions and all that kind of stuff. This is the whole spectrum. It's the whole radio of frequency versus just one frequency itself. But because it was so simply powerful, it was often overlooked. And because of the fact that I am not a dramatic person, obviously I chose from my way to awaken, as I call it, have my grand awakening in a way that was completely non-dramatic, except that I felt it was dramatic because I woke up one morning and just knew everything, right? I remembered everything. Of course, I would have volunteered to bring in a practice that was not dramatic, right? And so people would underestimate the power of it because it wasn't dramatic. So, see, this is going back to the point. The point is, we believe that something needs to be complex and it needs to be really dramatic and it has to have like lots of bells and whistles and be really, in many cases, flamboyant, right? Or have these particular rules because things can't be legitimate unless they have rules, right? That's what we believe. That's what the ego believes. These are all these dramas, that we've created, and we don't even realize that we're not even conscious of it. It's like, oh, well, this is nice and it's simple and it's powerful. Oh, but this is all prettier because we have all this other stuff, like the stuff that we have to incorporate with it, and it's something that I could say I can do and I feel like I'm important because I know how to do it, right? And and so what's important for us to do when we do all that, right, is step back and say, wait a second, what do I believe here? You know, I've had many men, and I'm not saying this to pick on men because I've worked with equally men and women over the years, and pretty much comes down to all the same stuff, right? But in society, men have been aggrandized to be these dramatic beings that have to like hold the weight of the world and like this physical thing, and women do it in a different way, right? Men and women do it differently. But what's interesting is what I've noticed is that over the years I've had a number of men who come to me who come to me with this whole cornucopia of things that they would like to work on, and a lot of times it's all very dramatic. Like there was one person I worked with for years, this who had been having possession issues since he was a child, who had a lot of other spiritual beings like coming to him and trying to take him over and influencing him, and he felt like he was always in the battle. And of course I saw that he had been a part of the Knights Templar at another point in time, and so there's that belief that has to be that grand battle between good and evil and all that kind of stuff. And so we worked through a whole bunch of stuff over it was years, right? And one of the things that we continuously worked on was for him to release his need for his experience to be dramatic, to be worthwhile, for his journey to be dramatic, to be worthwhile. And believe it or not, a lot of that stuff, as deep as people say, oh, no, my stuff is special, because that's all we always say is, oh, well, my stuff is special. Of course it is. It's special, and it's not special because it's no different than everybody else's, but it's just specific to you in the package that it shows up. So we're all special, and none of us are special, right? But that's what we always want to say. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, but often we attach to what it is that we believe has held us back, that has caused this grand journey of overcoming as part of our identity. Well, the challenge when we do that is that we don't want to let go of that because we believe it's part of our identity. Because who would I be if I didn't have to overcome this, right? So that has to do with things spiritually. It has to do with things physically in our realities, right? And I'm talking about like things that we like to try to claim victimhood to all the time. Abuse and abduction and all kinds of limiting experiences, right? Being hurt and what's the word I'm looking for? Excluded and put down and all that kind of stuff. We create that stuff in our realities for a certain set of lessons. And the key is it's great when we can acknowledge that that's what they're there for, and then we can change it. Many times what holds people back from changing it is their addiction to that drama being in their life. And that's even included in injury, in chronic illness, and things like that. Because when we say, I am whatever, right? People say things like, I'm diabetic and I am this and I am that. And when you say I am, you're creating that identity again and again and again, instead of saying, yes, I have this, I currently have this, or I am dealing with this, right? But, and so like when somebody comes to me with a chronic illness, because we can change everything, right? And I truly, honestly have seen some, what many would call miraculous changes in people and in situations. And that's only when somebody comes and says, I am ready to let this go. And they mean it. Often we say, I would like to let this go, but when you get down to the end of, to the nitty gritty of it, the ego is not ready to let it go, because it says, who would I be without this? And often, like I remember going into a session once with a man who had like the kind of leukemia that was the fatal kind, right? I guess he called it like the grand whatever. And I said, and I said to him, and it was funny because, it was just him and me, and I went to his house because he'd been going through treatment and all that kind of stuff. And I said, so how does this serve you? And he sort of started at me. And I said, how does it serve you? You wouldn't have it in your reality unless it serves you. And so, he only had to think for a moment. Like he after he started, and I said, and I convey the energy of acceptance, and this isn't with judgment. It's for us to change something or come to peace with it is for us to look at how it serves us in our reality. I say that with people who've been sexually abused, who've been raped, who have had all kinds of physical abuse and all kinds of stuff. And it's like, well, it served you in some way, or else it would have been put in your reality. You chose it at some level, right? Yes, it becomes a part of your identity. That's what I'm saying, Gloria. Yeah, absolutely. But when I said that, and he thought about it for a second, he goes, well, my kids are adults now. And, my wife and I started to drift apart, and we're not doing a lot of stuff together or whatever. And he goes, and actually, this has brought my family back together. I'm like, right? He knew it. It didn't take long. Once he got past the little startle of me asking him that straight out, because nobody really asked that question, right? And when he did that, I was like, okay. So then he was like, okay, so we worked on it. And yes, he did still pass away. We had that one session. We only had that one session, but we hit on some very uncomfortable stuff. And I said to him, look, whether you go or stay is irrelevant. That's your choice in your journey. If you're done with your lessons, then it's time to go. Or if you choose to stay, that's your choice too. But the thing is for you to come to peace with this, to complete this lesson, so that you don't have to come back and do it again and again and again the same way, because that's what we do, in my understanding. So we have all this stuff. And I've worked with so many people over the years with chronic illnesses, with with things that have been in their life for a long time, including abusive relationships. How many people, have others known where, somebody's in an abusive relationship, and, they complain, oh, I want to get out and I can't get out. And they've had there are many times that they've had situations where they can get out and then they get pulled back in. A lot of that has to do with this belief. And sometimes it truly is this underlying addiction to drama. Because who would they be without all of this, and get the attention, right, that they don't believe they deserve otherwise, right? This happens all the time. And so this is something we overlook, but it's very important, because it makes a huge difference in terms of what we call healing, right? It makes a huge difference as to whether we actually let go of something that holds us back, or we continue on with it and just try to mask it in different ways. And that, what we forget to look at, because we'll look at all these other things and saying, okay, so we can change this. We can change anything. We create it, we can change it, right? First is taking responsibility for our creation, of the creation of our reality. Second is looking at what we attach to our identity to say, well, if I didn't have that, what would my life be like? Right? So many times people say, if I didn't have my sicknesses or my illnesses or my limitations or my dramatic situation or where I'm being, punished all the time, then who would I be? Like, I get attention this way. And if people continue to pay attention, yes, it is their choice to stay or get out, Gloria. And that's the whole thing. But often, like, to change it within themselves, and they might say, oh, I want to leave, I want to leave, I want to leave, and then they don't. And part of it has to do with a lot of times this need for drama to feel like they're worthy, to feel like that they, will get attention and love and all that kind of stuff until it doesn't happen anymore, right? Or that's the only way they can do it. And that goes back to a worthiness thing. I always laugh because there's what was it, 6 steps of separation with, Kevin Bacon kind of thing. There's like 2 steps of separation from worthiness in anything. Like get down to worthiness issues of anything where we believe that we're not divinely worthy and infinitely able, right? So there's a lot of fears that are embedded in this, but what's even the biggest fear there is letting go of the drama is that attachment we have to our ego to say, if I don't have this in my life, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to be noticed? How am I going to have attention? How am I going to be loved? How am I going to be excited? Seriously, we think that it has to be like this big, huge, people don't know who they are without it. And people say, oh, I'm this, I'm that, and whatever. But the thing is, for us, if we don't look at this underneath it, if we don't look at this attachment to drama, I'm only important if I go through the big epic journey, like that's happening a lot more. I see that coming up a lot more. So what happens is, okay, well, yeah, I can say I want to let go of this and I want to heal this and this is uncomfortable and I'll change these things, but don't change this. And I always call it my precious, like in the Lord of the Rings, right? And Gollum, it's like precious. No, this is my precious. Don't take this away from me, right? The martyr syndrome, that's a big one in addiction to drama, right? The martyr syndrome is, oh, look at me sacrificing, look at me doing this and like, putting myself out and putting myself in lack so that somebody else won't be and all that kind of stuff so that I'm more important and I'm more worthy and I'm more lovable. And we buy into that as a culture, as a world we have. And now it's time to change that. So that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing is to step in your life and say, okay, where am I doing this? Like where am I staying in a situation? So am I practicing, am I in a practice? Like, do I feel like so it's great. It's like, I like to try all different kinds of flavors of ice cream. So when we get to the spiritual stuff, right? And we talk about orientations and frequencies and sounds and practices and hand positions and all that kind of stuff. And where we stand in regards to the sun and where we stand in regards to the moon, if we stand on our head on the third full moon, like all that kind of stuff. And we laugh when we say that, but look at the things that you feel like, oh, I cannot access this energy unless I am here, like unless I'm doing this, because that's an addiction, and that's an addiction to drama in a way, because it's saying, oh, well, I have to, for me to access this, I have to do all this stuff because then I feel more important because I've memorized how to do it. And, and I followed the rules, right? So the thing is to step back, to observe, and look at yourself and say, okay, so where am I doing that? Where am I saying, oh, I have to do this to do this? And, oh, it has to be I have to have it. Oh, how many times I've said, I've heard people say, oh, that's just not my luck. Or like, I've always had a cloud over me. Or, oh yeah, I should be so lucky. And I'm like, when people say things like that, I'm like, well, you are if you choose to be. And if you believe you can create it and you allow yourself to create it from a place of, I am worthy of this. See how easy that can be. And so it's really funny because, and I'll tell you, I started in one place in my life where I did have quite a dramatic childhood and early adulthood. And I changed that over the years, and I've changed it even more coming into this in the 2000s. I changed that so that I can just be my divine self. Because when we stop putting all this energy to the drama and whatever, it's so much more fun to simply play in what we can remember and to say, how, okay, so if I put a little bit of drama in this without getting, addicted to it, well, what can I try to help me allow myself to remember even more, right? What can I physically do in this part of my embodiment besides even just opening up to my higher self, which we really don't have to do anything else. And it can be that easy, right? And yet we resist that until we come to the place of understanding I don't have to have the dramatic journey anymore. Like, this is actually part of the most incredibly expansive and amazing magical things that I have had in my life have happened when I let go of all the drama. And just because then I had the energy available to allow the magic, right? Yeah, and that's where the tools, Negi says, that's where the tools become valuable, learning to become the observer without attachment. Yeah. So, when we get to this place of saying, okay, so instead of saying, oh, I have to use this to access that, right? It's changing our habits. So say, okay, I commit myself to all my habits and practices to being temporary things that I put in place so that it helps me to remember and open up. And that once I do that, I can let go of them. That's the challenge that we have, because then that's a little tiny innate thing with the drama, right? We think, okay, so I need to have this because that's how I did it before. And it's like, well, no, part of it is just to put the tool in place, and that's why it's a tool, to use it until we remember we created the tool to begin with, and now we have it embedded in us, ingrained in the remembrance, so that we can let go of the tool, and then we take out even another little step. Yeah, Gloria says letting go of drama is so freeing. It really is. It truly is. But the funny thing is, what I've had, and I know we're running a little over, but what I've had, this is such a huge topic. I've had people tell me that I'm non-compassionate, right? Because I don't get stuck in drama. Like, I don't go, oh, that's horrible, because I don't judge, right? I see things like I commit myself to stepping back and looking at the bigger picture and being in a place of love and wholeness and honoring everybody's journeys, right? So, like, I've had people tell, and I know others that I know, it's like people say, oh, well, you're not compassionate and da da da. And I'm like, well, no, there's a difference between loving and being in a place of love and being, if you look up the word compassionate, it's like having pity for somebody else's journey. And I'm like, but if I believe that everybody's journey is perfect as the divine, infinitely divine embodiment that they are, then I wouldn't have pity for anybody, because how perfect, right? Nikki says Aquarius. That is an attribute of Aquarius, I think, isn't it? but so, like, but really, it's coming from a space of love and being free of drama, right? Being free of, like, and compassion is having love and honoring the journeys of all around in this part. To me, it's not having pity, because I don't believe anybody's in lack. Everybody's in their choice of their reality, and it's a matter of what it chooses to help them. I've had, like, to help them get to their lessons of, like, to remember, so that they can let it all go. And if I'm guided to be a part of it, that's great. And if I'm not, and I'm just guided to hold space of love, that's actually just as perfect. So anyway, so that's the home play for this week. Is step back and look in your life where it is that you're still, like, sort of addicted to drama, even if it's, like, really subtle things. Like, and drama can be something as little as, I have to do this act, or I have to act this way, or I have to do this way, or I have to be this kind of person. I have to do this and save the day. There's so many there's so many different things. And step back to observe yourself and say, so why do I believe that? And if the answer is so that I can be a good person, then say, why do I believe that I'm not a good person? Like, how do I shift that within myself? And that's where we get to. That's the important part. So when we can do that, and then we get away from the drama, creation, the magic of connection, intuition, our abilities of wholeness, which are pretty much what people call psychic abilities and all that kind of stuff. That all just comes easily. And they come more easily the more we let go of those little dramatic things that we think we require. Like, oh, I have to channel, I have to do this, I have to do that. And it's like, okay, they're great tools and things to play with. And then we can let it go. And then we can say, you know what, that's just me in a different voice. It's just me as the divine being reflected this way. And so when there's no need to be dramatic, because I don't have to prove myself, I don't have to have somebody approve of me for me to feel valid. Like, that's the key. And that's, of course, where does it go to? The 2 steps of worthiness. And where does the worthiness come from? Is going within and doing your self work. Ha! I come around to it all the time. So do that and look at yourself this week and say, where is it that I'm still sort of addicted to having these little dog and pony into these little, plays and whatever. And how can I change that? How do I go inside and shift that within myself, or just ask your guidance and say, okay, I'm ready to do that. And if you're not, then the thing is to step back and say, well, whoa, if I'm not, why does that feel icky if I'm like afraid to let go of this? Or the ego says, oh, you can't do this. You could never do this, because that's actually a defense mechanism, because it means that you're afraid to let go of it for some reason or another. So lots more to talk about this, but we have gone a bit over. So think about that this week. Maybe there'll be a part 2 next week. We'll see. Have a great one. Thank you for joining me. This is Angela Coulter with this week's Living the Gift. Have a good one.